So it's a very complex matter, of course. And also from this, the way the process will develop, the consequence for the emotional experience is going to vary. If the person to whom you talk is going to stimulate your cognitive processing, you will be able to reprocess the emotional episode and perhaps to take perspective, take distance, and so on and so on. And in this case, you have chances to recover from the emotional episode or to overcome the emotional episode. Or if the person is simply listening to you and comforting you and sustaining you and so on, you will simply revive the emotion and you wouldn't go through the episode. And that's two ways in which the emotional episode can be handled in the social sharing. That's what we call cognitive way or the socio-affective way. And the consequences for the emotion vary as a function of the way it's narrated and processed. Does it answer your question? Thank you.
Okay, we have two more questions at the moment.
Thank you very much. This was an amazing presentation, and I guess my comment and the question is related to interdisciplinarity. And I was thinking as you were talking through various issues that would be more emphasized, but I sense you have it in your materials, but you didn't talk about it, the boundaries between social psychology and sociology, politics, history, and say hermeneutics, anything that deals with meaning. And you talked a lot about the last one, the meaning, that the transmission of emotion is related to storytelling. But in this case, I was thinking about the possible boundaries in storytelling, and it was already mentioned, that the boundaries of class, gender, race, that the same emotion will be endowed already initially with a different meaning, but say people belonging to different races. And therefore, it will be, in your diagram showing spreading, it will be spreading within already sort of determined channels of, say, race boundaries, gender boundaries, and so on. So I guess that's something that interests me, because tomorrow we will be talking more about the politics of all of this, right? And the politics enters this process from the beginning, the way we think about it. And, you know, to put it bluntly, there's the concept of manipulation. Right? The politicians can manipulate emotions through all kinds of mechanisms that would interfere with that picture that you're showing. So I guess that's the question for you also. Have you done any work related to this sort of explicit political manipulation or less explicit political manipulation? And one more thing about history, that your history is sort of generational history. Things change as one generation moves to another, and a new generation takes over the control over the public domain and retells the story, and it's very convincing. But in one of your graphs you showed the explosion of the films about the Holocaust in the second generation, or in general World War II. And you showed that the stories are now told in a completely different way. Tarantino's version is completely new, changes emotions, right? You are elated, they cut it back, right? And all those kinds of things. And then my kids started thinking, maybe this is how it happened. Although I hope I told them that no, that didn't happen that way. But the point is that there are other histories, right? Like political history. And there are certain important moments, like 1989-91, and the fall of the communism, and the explosion of movies about the Holocaust and the war is related not necessarily to the generational change, but the fact that now the censorship is gone, and people are trying to tell the story afresh. And there's one more thing, they are digging into new dimensions of stories of what happened, namely, say, the complicity of local populations in the Holocaust. Right? And Ida, the Polish film that just got an Oscar, is about that. Right? So it is retelling of the story in the new way because it is allowed by the changed political time, not just generational time.
I totally agree. That was present in my slides. I've been cutting some slides because of to save time. But actually, the fact that people who were important at the time of the event do disappear or do are not present anymore after one generation. It's a very important aspect of the evolution. But I'm sensible to the question of generation because I conducted a study in Belgium about the intergroup relationship between Flemish-speaking people and French-speaking people in Belgium. And there is a very interesting observation about generational evolution because in one of the two groups in Belgium, the economical situation is changing dramatically with a fantastic improvement, which makes that those people are not young people actually, do not experience the same as the former generation of their own group. And due to this fact, they are changing their perception of history and changing their attitude with respect to the country. I was very struck by this generational effect. Thank you for the question.
One more, briefly.
One brief question.
Thank you very much for your talk. And I think you made a very brave statement, and I'm sure that I'm not the first one who actually underlined that your findings are basically resisting to intersectional analysis. So I was wondering if you can, in this brief time we have got, you can elaborate a little bit more on, for example, on the gender differences. And I wonder if you can name some of the findings you found, what is the literature on which you are actually making this claim that there is no gender difference as far as your concept of social sharing is concerned. Thank you.
So yes, if you take a frequency of social sharing after an emotional episode, you would observe for a given type of episode of a given intensity, similar frequencies when you compare women and men, and this would be the same for whatever the emotional intensity involved. Which means that frequency of social sharing is something which doesn't differentiate between men and women, despite the heavier representation created that women share their emotion more than men do. But now, if you observe the way people do so, there is tremendous differences between men and women in the partner they choose. It's not the case in younger generation. If you compare adolescents for the person they choose for sharing their emotion, men and women would be the same. For younger people in general, there are no variation. But if you take mature people, adult age, for instance, between 40 and 60 years, then there is something extremely striking that the social sharing partner for a woman is not only the spouse, which is the predominant partner, but also family members, also one's own children, and the best friend is of course very important to women. And if you take men, 75% of the social sharing of a man who is married is going to be on the back of the spouse. So they put all the eggs in the same basket in a sense, which means that in terms of relationship, it's very heavy. And this is having consequences. For instance, when a man is losing her spouse because the spouse dies, people who work on bereavement always tell me that the fact of their social sharing privilege to their wife probably explain the fact that the loss of a spouse it's particularly a bad thing for a man because he loses much more than a woman does. So that's a very important observation that is made, which differentiates the social sharing of men and women. They do not use the same target, especially if you take adult social sharing. Did that answer your question?
I think this is it. Coffee break.
Barbara, would you like to?
Well, just
Thank you very much.
Thank you.